back to Women Making Moves, where we celebrate the moves that women are making. My name is Amy Pons, founder of Unlock the Magic Coaching, Healing, and Magic School. I'm joined today with Rachael Hunt. Rachael is a member of the Chippewas of Nawash First Nation and the founder and CEO of Freedom School Co. She is a keynote speaker, Indigenous employee empowerment consultant, and intuitive mentor, specializing in helping organizations retain, empower, and elevate Indigenous talent. She works with companies to break systemic barriers, increase Indigenous representation in leadership, and foster workplace environments where Indigenous employees thrive. She also mentors Indigenous women and entrepreneurs to help them achieve their potential with greater confidence and clarity while walking in two worlds personally and professionally. As the host of the Cyclebreakers Podcast, Rachael is leading conversations on Indigenous success, prosperity, and well-being in both corporate and entrepreneurial spaces. As the creator of the award-winning Freedom Method, Rachael is a master practitioner trained in NLP, EFT, hypnosis, somatic therapy, holy fire, Reiki, and success coaching. Rachael, welcome.
Thank you so much. I know that was a mouthful, so I appreciate you
My
reading through
pleasure.
that bio. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
I am too. One of the things that caught my eye was I read this somewhere before today, but I am a dragon fire Reiki healer certified.
Oh,
So yeah, so it was like interesting to see how those two, I mean, I know that there's so many modalities, but that's what my training is anchored in. So
oh, Dragonfire. I've never actually heard of that lineage of Reiki before, but that sounds powerful.
I met my dragon the first day of training. I was like, whoa, hey, Queen. Wow. Uh,
Wow.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So welcome. Is your Cycle Breakers podcast specific to Indigenous women or people?
It is,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
So I amplify Indigenous voices and stories predominantly. Through that, I do some solo episodes, but yeah, Indigenous leaders, authors, medicine people, those who are doing work in the realm of Indigenous sovereignty and healing. So, uh,
Mm,
but cycle breakers, I think, are amongst all of us. So anyone could listen and still gather wisdom and medicine from it. But yeah, my intention was to create spaces that Indigenous folks with our complex backgrounds and histories and traumas can just feel seen and safe and like they're not alone.
yes, that's so beautiful. And I totally get that. I set out for Women Making Moves with the intention to amplify women of the world that are creating the new existence of
Mm.
humanity, of soul work. And that's not to suggest that anyone who doesn't identify as a woman is not doing that work. It's just simply my personal amplification calling.
Yeah, and I love that. And we all have a unique way of bringing this work and the light and the magic and the medicine and everything in between to the world. So yeah, I love what you stand for and to be here to have a conversation about unlocking the magic.
Yes, unlocking the magic. I would love to hear your thoughts on what the magic is for you. Because I was a 20-year corporate executive that was like, when I was 4 or 5, and I know you'll know what I mean by this, children are so close to the veil. Like they just came from the spirit plane. So they're so connected, they're so magical. And as a kid, as a child, I would go up to adults and like read them. I would leverage my clairsentience and claircognizance, and you can imagine how that played out. I was told that like that's wrong, that's bad, you're weird, witch, all these things. And so it was literally beaten out of me as a child to stop my gifts or my abilities. So didn't do that for 40 years. But about 10 years ago, I started remembering that I
Mm,
did have those really special, amazing gifts as a child. And I was like, oh, wait, as I approach 40, these are coming back unapologetically, which is amazing. But also in my corporate world, I didn't know how to start embracing that whatsoever. And I didn't know where I came from, literally. And so there was just a lot of excavating for me personally. And I don't know if you'll agree, but I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a hard work. It's of the remembering and of the unlearning and decentralizing white supremacy, patriarchy, ableism. I mean, all of the things, all of the isms, I guess. It's a lot. And I feel hopeful talking with people like you all day, every day in my world that get it, that are all the pioneers of welcoming in or
mm.
helping usher people to themselves again.
No, I love that. I think there is this collective remembering happening right now. I think in the work that I do, especially as a reconnecting Indigenous woman. And I say reconnecting because even though I always knew I was Indigenous, I knew the community I was from. Creator came to me, or Spirit came to me 4 years ago now, and urged me to reconnect, to come home. And I finally answered that calling. I was already, I don't want to say always, I was already on a deep spiritual journey and was quite intuitive, but something that was missing in my life was, and something that I was traveling the world trying to find the answers to, was right in front of me all along. And reconnecting for me has been a deep remembering of not just who I came here to be in this world, but those who walked before me, and connecting to my lineage and my ancestors, and knowing that I came from a lineage of medicine women and chiefs and storytellers and knowledge keepers and elders. So knowing that that's also within me, and that I love sharing that story with others, but also in empowering others to come home to themselves as well, whatever that might look like.
Yes. I would love to delve a little deeper into how you returned home and the awareness that you always had. And there was something about me, and this is an audio podcast, so I'm white. And there was something about me that knew that this was never my, I, I didn't come from here. I live in Chicagoland, now known as Chicagoland, but every spring when I plant garden, I honor the land and Peoria. The people of Peoria were original to this land, and I always speak to them, and I build little mounds in honor of them and leave them as offerings, and just make sure that I am honoring what they set forth so long ago. I personally come from a long line of Scottish shamans.
Mm.
So I would love to go to Scotland and feel the bloodline. That's something that's on my list, and I want to live there sometime, because I don't know, I'd love to hear your story about when you step on your land, what that feels like.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. And I think that it's important for everyone to connect to their original ancestry, like, yeah, like Indigenous culture, Native American culture, you're based in the States, Indigenous here in Canada. It's so beautiful. And we see, folks being inspired by, our original ways, but to the effect of appropriate or cultural appropriation often, right? And so we hear this conversation, and I get it. Like, it's a beautiful, like, there's so many cultures within, Native American history, and within, First Nations communities here in Canada. There's also such rich, beautiful cultural ancestral histories in all lineages. And so I encourage friends of mine to connect to their original ways. And yeah, if it's British descent, if it's Scottish descent, if it's Italian
Mhm.
descent, like, connect to that, because what I think a lot of people are seeking for, and for me, for years, it was this deeper sense of meaning and purpose in my life, and a deeper connection of to who I am. And I felt very lost. I don't think I would have named it at that time. I just thought I was just being free-spirited and nomadic and running around the globe and living in different places. But ultimately, I was trying to find who I was. So growing up, not raised in culture or in community, but knowing where that was, it was about an hour north of where I grew up, and spent some time going to different powwows and spending time on family property at a very, very young age. But for like 30 years or more of my life, there was just no connection whatsoever. So just kind of like a gaping hole that I didn't know was there. And then when I intentionally began reconnecting in 2022, it is visceral what I feel when I drive across the invisible border, if you will, into the reservation that my family, and it's on my mom's side, my Indigenous lineage, like driving across into the reservation, that I feel. I don't know how to describe it other than I just feel medicine. I just feel this light, ethereal sensation, and it's the ancestors, it's the land, it's all of it. And it's so beautiful. Like it, yeah, I'll get chills. I'll just have all of a sudden crazy downloads. I will just feel this lightness. And that is the power of land. That is the power of ancestral connection. And I think that even if we don't have the opportunity, because it is a privilege, even though I grew up close to my ancestral land, it's still a privilege that I'm able to go and connect to my community because not everybody has that opportunity. I'm grateful that my family has welcomed me with open arms and I get to go to ceremony and all of these really beautiful things. And maybe your ancestry and your lineage is like you, not in this continent, and it requires you to travel, and that requires time and resources and all of this. But if you get, that opportunity, I think it's incredible. But like you mentioned, you're honoring the very land that you currently inhabit, that has raised you, has held you, has supported you. That is still available to all of us. And I think there's a way that we can honor and respect the lands that we are on without extracting or trying to take what is original to the land as our own. So I think it's really beautiful that you give back in those ways. And I actually encourage that amongst my friends. I now give the gift of culture for every birthday or every, anytime you would give a gift, because to me it's important to pass what I'm now learning on to others because they're fascinated by this history, as a lot of folks are. So I try to pass that on and share, some practices such as offerings to the land, which I love that you already do because that's something that I share with my friends. Like, you feel connected to the land, give back to the land. Like, the land wants these gifts, wants to feel that offering.
Mama Gaia. Our earth is a goddess, is a breathing creature. She's a soul, and it's,
Mhm.
if you agree with it, there's a site that you can go to figure out the land and like whose original land,
Yeah.
like Native CA. If you agree with that, I'll put it like within the episode and everything
Yeah,
like that. When I found out the people, I did some research and they built mounds of dirt. So last year, I created two mounds and I gave an offering and I said something brief calling in the people of the Peoria. Rachael, the next day there was a third mound left for me.
wow.
I I just cried. I was like, "Thank you so much. Thank you for hearing, receiving me, and saying it's okay that I'm going to be planting here, and all of that." It was just so special.
That's
I was
amazing. I
I
love that.
was just floored.
I think it's so beautiful. I have a friend who lives on this very sacred piece of land that we're like fairies live here. Like, it's just so magical.
Hmm.
And I was with her quite a bit this past summer, and she would say that she would leave like little trinkets out for them and that they
Hmm.
would start leaving trinkets for her.
Yes.
And the land, it's actually called the Grey Highlands is the area, and it's very connected to Scottish
I felt
ancestry.
something when I felt something when you said that. I'm like, "Mm."
Yeah, so actually, yeah, so the area I grew up in, like, there's my home community, but then where I actually grew up with my family in surrounding communities, there's a lot of Scottish ancestry. And so this particular area and land that she lives on is, yeah, just like beautiful rolling hills, and it's like I think the highest elevation in the province. Anyway, so there's, yeah, connection to like
Mm.
there is fairy magic there. Like, you feel it when you go to her place. It's in the country, it's very remote. And then she was getting little trinkets from the
Mm.
fairies. And I'm like, oh my God, I love that. So I believe in all of it. I love
Oh
all of
yeah.
that.
I mean,
That's
we
magic.
I think what's unfortunate is like at some point in adulthood, and it probably happens when we're small kids, and I'll speak for myself as like in the US, you're taught so young that magic isn't real or it's just your imagination. We get so far away from the remembering that we are a soul having a human experience that we only get into the human and like what we can see or touch, and we just forget that magic is so real and it's actually what we knew first.
Oh,
And magic can be so many different things to different people. I'm not suggesting there's one definition, but it's just I feel it's the openness to understand, that there's energies and there's entities and there's everything around us at all times. Like personally, I have thousands of women from my lineage around me at all times, all
mm,
times. And sometimes I will lovingly, if I'm having like a tough human day, I'll say, ladies, ladies on my right, take one step back, please. Thank you. And just they're like, oh, right. Okay, got it. Because Amy's having a human day. That kind of understanding. And I think it's so both unfortunate and a gift when we've gotten so far from what we remember in our bones, in our DNA, and a gift when, like what you feel when you drive across the land. And I'll give an example, a very 3D example of mine. Back when I was like 12, and I think like Titanic, the movie came out, they played in the movie like this Irish Celtic music, and there was something in me that was like vibrating. And I'm like, what's that? And I didn't know what to do with that at 12 years old, but like I now know. Y'all, that's the most sacred, amazing thing when your body knows, when your body reacts to something, whether it be music or when you said highlands and I felt like a spark from my solar plexus. Those are the things, that's what's a gift. That's actually your bones trying to tell you, oh, we know something about that. Like we know. And we've gotten so far as humans, if it's not written down in a book and we took a test on it, then it's not real. That's not true. Like what we
Mhm.
know in our bodies is actually the real truth. And what a beautiful invitation when we start to feel that by any degree. And to your point, there's a collective remembering happening. And that's, I feel, what we should be following right now and hanging
Yeah.
on to.
Totally. I think probably similar to you, I have a group of friends who are very into these conversations and without fail multiple times a week that I'm, voice noting with a friend back and forth and we're just like, you just can't make this shit up. Pardon my
No,
friend. You just can't
no.
make it up. Like there are just too many magical, synchronistic, like you can't make it up. And that's when you're open to the magic. One thing I
Yeah.
want to add, because it kind of ties into your story about hearing the Celtic music and it just viscerally speaking to you at a young age, is so I was living in Tulum, Mexico in 2021 to 2022. And that's where I got the call from Creator to come home. And it was because I was in this ceremony, a breathwork and cacao ceremony in the middle of the Mayan jungle one evening. And it was the drums that they were playing towards the end of it that literally my entire body remembered in that moment. And the message from Creator came through and was like, okay, my girl, you're having fun in Mexico, but we need you home on the land. Your
Yeah.
land, your, like, not my land, but like your ancestral land, the culture, the community, the language. And I knew. And it was, I joke about it. I'm like the Mayan ancestors and my Anishinaabe ancestors, they got me because I'd been on the run, on the go, like living this nomadic life. And they were like, we needed to get her attention. And we did it. We finally did it. And I listened. It was the first time because I had heard rumblings, healers would mirror it back to me and different Reiki sessions, like, oh, I'm hearing drums.
Mhm.
I'm hearing your ancestors are trying to call you home. And I would make every excuse in the book. I don't, it's just not the right time. I don't know where to begin. And something shifted because I could have still made every excuse in the book, but in that moment, my soul was ready.
Mhm.
I was ready to answer and it was not easy. I'm going to say very humbling journey, a lot of identity crises, a lot of dark nights of the soul. I was put through a lot of initiations, but I wouldn't change any of it because it's brought me to here and to this version of me and I'm like I like this version of me best.
Dark Nights of the Soul. For y'all that don't know that, I've had a few myself and they're not done. Like I don't think they're ever done. Dark Nights of the Soul is I guess the best way to put it is like the reckoning with your ego. When you've only been operating in the human and forgetting that you are a soul and you without getting too far into it. I think that it's not that everything is pre-planned for us when we get here. It's more that we have a blueprint and we will be pinged how far or close we are to alignment with that blueprint. But we also have free will, so we can do whatever we want. Some people are like, well, I don't want to do all the work and I don't want to go through a dark night of the soul and I don't want to. Well, again, free will, you don't have to do anything. And if you're meant to be part of the creating the new paradigm, I don't want to say that there's not a choice, but the further you get from that, if that is what you're meant to experience here on this lifetime, I don't know. Do you think you have a choice at some point anymore?
It's interesting because as you were saying that, I'm like, you know what? What I think is our human, our like meat suit will resist. I think for me,
Yeah.
I resisted. If I talk about, or if I think about, what I just described of I finally answered the call, my meat suit was resisting. My 3D body was like, yeah, no. Like, no, I'm good. I'm good with this human experience, frolicking around the world. But what eventually happened was I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a choice, meaning that the intentions I was putting out in the world and the path that I thought were going to get me towards those intentions was very different. And so I got deeply humbled many times, very, very humbled, and and then initiated. I don't want to say because you're right, we do have free will. So I could have continued to resist it, but at a certain point, you realize that the more you resist, the bumpier it's going to be, the bumpier it's going to be. And so at some point you do kind of come to and you're like, okay, what if I just let go a little bit? Like what if I just trusted and surrendered a little bit? That's what I can share from my personal lived experience. And I think with a lot of experiences of clients of mine who've navigated something similar. And so when you finally do surrender and answer the call in my experience and actually have to go do even more inner work, because it was not like I was resisting inner work, I was doing it, but it was resisting the soul level work that I had to do to propel to my destiny, like to my highest potential, which I'm still on that journey, but it required me to completely crash and burn my old business. It required me to completely let go of old paradigms, old identities, old patterns that were so deeply ingrained, break so many freaking cycles, like not easy work to be on this current trajectory that I'm on, this complete 180 pivot that I didn't do on my own. Creator guided me, but that my ancestors guided me, but that I eventually surrendered into. And I think that I don't want to say chosen one as if it's like hierarchy or you're better than. I say it in like if it's in your destiny to be, in my terminology, a cycle breaker. I mean, everyone can use that word, but it's like that's the language that I use quite a bit to be a cycle breaker, to unlock your magic and your power, your potential. You will eventually course correct. Like I think eventually at some point in your life, whether it's in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, there will come a point in this life. And if it's not meant to happen in this lifetime, it's going to happen in the next lifetime. I just
Right, and
believe
you just won't. Right, exactly.
that.
Everyone is fulfilling their role
Yeah,
perfectly at this time and place. And so for me, yeah, I had rejected it too. And I called it my earth suit. My earth suit had rejected it for, 40 years. And then literally I turned 40. The next day, I fell out of bed with vertigo. Like my spirit, my guides I literally had this vision. They were like in a scrum huddle and they're like, what are we going to give her? What are we going to put in her pathway? Because she's like not getting it. It was this moment, this culmination of, for me, a very toxic workplace, a very like psychological abuse in the workplace. And here's the thing that makes part of it, I feel, for me, at least in my experience, so hard is that I was being asked to look at all the people, places, and things in my 3D existence. And the hardest part was none of it was in alignment, like none of it. And it was like, oh shit, this is going to be a lot of work. And I didn't want to do that. Well, of course we don't want to, but here's where I was sidelined. My earth suit was given various physical ailments that literally put me in the hospital. That's what was starting to unfold so that I would get the memo. And so I guess like to your point, yes, we always have free will. We always have choice. We can always say no, thank you, but you can only hit snooze, I feel, for so long before it does impact your earth suit and like you won't be able to actually keep going on your trajectory if you're absolutely meant to follow a certain blueprint here in this lifetime.
I couldn't agree more. I think, yeah, what you described, I experienced myself. I didn't work in corporate as long as you, but enough that there was definitely psychological abuse. There was such a toxic environment. And it actually was the catalyst to me developing an autoimmune disease. And I think that was probably underlying pre. existing, but the stress of that workplace environment just catapulted it into existence. But I hear that for many people. Maybe it's not a toxic workplace, maybe it's a relationship, or maybe it's just life in general, but that often it's health related and physical ailments being the the pathway to an awakening. Like I think for many people and most of my closest friends, they've had a major struggle with their health at some point in their life that actually was like, yeah, a portal to like a deeper spiritual awakening. Because I just think that is sometimes the only way we become aware and like creator, God, source, spirit, universe can get our attention is when our physical bodies are seemingly failing us. And so it can happen in a whole slew of other ways. But I think I resonate deeply with that. And I think of any rock bottom that I've hit in my life, and I've hit many very low points, it then always becomes the catalyst
Mhm.
to the rebirth, like always,
Well,
always. So
well, yeah,
easy.
a lot of my clients are like, why does it have to be so hard though? I was like, well, imagine if you are completely off your trajectory and your guides are really trying to help you. They really only have your physical surroundings to put things in your pathway. So is what we feel is like so quote unquote hard. Well, it's them being intentional. So it's
Hmm.
like trying to find grace for your guides too. It's like they're not trying to like fuck you up. But yes, it can feel like that. Yes. You know, some people like get really upset and they're like, "Are they just testing me because that doesn't feel high vibe?" I'm like, "Well, again, what we consider as a test, they're putting things in our pathway to get our attention, our feel like, and it's not always easy because we are humaning so hard. So it's
Yeah,
just how you can feel peace with that. I feel so synchronous with you because I always say, God, source, universe, creator. Like if we, because it's not, I don't feel there's whatever you, it's back inward. It's like, what do you resonate with? What are you, it's going back in.
totally.
Rachel, tell me about I have magic school. Tell me about Freedom School and then also tell me about what moves you're excited to be making. What's coming up for you? What's exciting?
Yeah. So Freedom School is a business I started 2019. So it's been around, but it's seen multiple iterations. And the iteration of it today, as it was in the very beginning, is empowerment. At the foundation of everything is empowerment, but the scope of it and the focus of it has changed from women's empowerment to, I'm going to say, Indigenous empowerment, meaning that the majority of the folks that I work with, whether it's private mentorship or through my certification or a workshop or a keynote, is to support Indigenous folks, mostly women, to, a lot of what I've shared is come home to themselves and to reconcile with traumas of history, whether it's from childhood, intergenerationally, ancestrally, and to awaken our innate gifts in our medicine, to reclaim our identities as sovereign Indigenous peoples, and to navigate, the modern world while still carrying our cultural values. And so that, looks different depending on the context, but ultimately my work centers on subconscious and somatic reprogramming. So working with the mind, the body, and our energy field as well to come into harmony. And honestly, that is what our ancestors knew. Like I'm teaching it from a neuroscience perspective because that's modern science, but I'm also doing it from an indigenous worldview because that's, my reconnecting self. But a lot of what I teach and then what I hear in ceremony and these stories and these original ways, I'm like, wait a dang minute. They've known this since time immemorial. And, here it is being packaged up in modern ways. So what I think is really cool is that this language that we now have for certain things that are like science backed, trauma informed, are actually also a part of that remembering of giving language to things that we've always known and just coming back into harmony with that. And a lot of it is identity based of, feeling worthy to take up space, feeling worthy to be seen. And I think that's honestly something, I don't know if you work predominantly with women. I think you said you did, but I think I see that with women across the board, but I add that added layer of nuance and complexity with Indigenous folks because for so long, for generations, it wasn't safe to be Indigenous. It wasn't safe to practice our culture and to have ceremony. I mean, actually, it was outlawed fully. So there's a lot of that reclamation and that reckoning taking place. And I'm just one part of that equation to guide those who are ready for this work to do so, and yeah, to resource them with ways to succeed, to thrive, to take up space, and to know that they matter, their stories matter, their voices matter. And the pathway towards that is, again, like you said, there's free will. But I just happen to be someone who supports, encourages, and empowers that. And it's really, really needed in our communities. It's really needed because there's a lot of brokenness, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of trauma. And we talk about a hopeful, new, bright future. I have optimism for it, but it requires us to do the heavy lifting, cycle breaking work. So, yeah, a lot of what I'm excited about right now is teaching a lot of these tools to the women in my certification because I see I'm one person. I'm only capable of moving the needle so far, but the ripple effect of me then passing this information and these tools to other Indigenous women, that's powerful because that ripple effect is generational. That is then legacy work. So I think that's what I'm, yeah, most excited about, and just talking in, settings like this about how important it is for us to honor our lineage and our ancestry, even if you're non-Indigenous.
Well, I love that you root it and base it in somatic and science. I go all the way into woo and I'm like, just trust self. That's it. And mine comes from like the medicine woman, shamanism, witchcraft of again, that wasn't safe for so long. And so many of especially women, but I mean there's a witch wound out there. That's real. And what I'll always share with what I teach is radical trust in self, and we do not do spiritual bypassing. We don't just jump into something saying, well, I think this, so it's true. Well, first of all, I'm going to challenge that and say, is it think or feel? Because what I'm talking about with radical trust and going, we go straight into the quantum field, and that's where I work. It's a feeling, it's in your body. That's the discernment to understand where it's coming from. I'm not suggesting everyone go out and just be like, well, I think this, so it's true. No, that's not what I'm talking about at all. It's something so much deeper. So I love the approach you take, which might be a little bit easier than mine, because I'm just like, trust yourself.
I
But
think, but it sounds also, I mean, that is somatic. If we're listening to our body, listening to our cues, I mean, somatic intelligence is really like when I was, you know, getting certified as a somatic practitioner, I was like, well, I mean, obviously it had been after doing years and years of my own work, but really it's, yeah, just coming back into connection with our intuition. And it's pretty crazy how you were saying how far we've gotten from listening to ourselves, and how I even see this with friends of mine, how it's so obvious to me, not in a situation, how they're speaking a language that implies they're aware of what their intuition is telling them, but they do something totally different. And I know that's really hard. I did that for many years. And every time I didn't listen to my intuition, that's when I would hit a rock bottom. And so I just know better because I've lived through the consequences of not listening to my intuition and not listening to my true self. So I still think I'm like, that's somatic in nature, is being able to be aware of what you're feeling and what your body is communicating, what your intuition is communicating, and actually listening.
you're absolutely right. And I used to, consent is the utmost importance, of course, on the soul, from a soul perspective. I hear that too. And I used to want to jump in and like say, can I tell you what I'm getting? Can I tell you what I'm reading and feeling? Beautifully. Now I am able to understand from my guides and theirs whether or not I'm meant to opine.
Mhm.
And I'll still always ask, do you mind if I share something I'm getting? But I used to just jump in and feel like I had to always, and it's not always ours. It's not always mine to jump in and share that. I want to go to a post that you made recently on LinkedIn, which is, I'm just going to read the first line, and I want to talk about this more. Manifestation is everywhere, and a lot of it misses the point. I actually wrote a blog similar to this today, which was, we're always creating. Every nanosecond of life, we are creating. And it depends on what our core truth center beliefs, thoughts are as our truth, and we might be creating more of what we don't want
Mm.
inadvertently. Is that something that is that what you were talking about in this post?
So that post, what my intention with that post was, because as I've gone deeper into understanding our nervous system and somatics, and I've been a self-proclaimed self-help personal development junkie for like over a decade. Like I've read it all, I've watched it all. I love it. I still love it. I love talking about manifestation. I know it's real. I know it's real. But what my intention with that post was to talk about the nuance with manifestation when it comes to, and again, often coming from the lens of what I see in my practice with Indigenous folks, is that manifestation from the New Age perspective often misses the nuances and complexities of trauma. And if we are living in a state of survival, our system is not actually even able to, number one, grasp and comprehend a bigger goal, vision, or dream. Maybe you've kind of got it like, oh, this would be nice, but there is such an incongruence within your system. It does not feel safe to, move towards that. So you will continually sabotage or shut down or whatever. And you're actually just in by nature going to be limiting your capacity. And so what I've been talking about a lot more is that, manifestation needs to go deeper than just like ask, believe, receive. Like it really needs to also factor in someone's complex history. It doesn't mean that manifestation needs to be complex, but that we need to first understand like we need to feel safe before we can actually feel worthy. Because I think worthiness is also important, but like our nervous system just needs to feel safe. Then we can start to expand into our identity and who we need to become. We talk about the quantum realm, which I love all of that. It's real. I'm not disputing that. But there are things that are just being missed in the conversation around manifestation when someone has lived experience with trauma, complex trauma, PTSD. And that's most people, to be honest. And I think having that conversation can then open people up to understand maybe why things aren't panning out and that it's not an inherent flaw and that it's just a matter of we need to just, tend to your system a little bit so that it actually feels safe to think bigger, that it actually feels safe to expand into, the quantum realm. And once we secure that baseline safety, then we can think bigger picture. So yeah, that was my intention. I also think I don't disagree with what you were saying as well. But yeah, my angle with that one was just looking at manifestation from a trauma informed lens. And yeah, I think giving hope to people who might just look at like, no matter how hard I try, or how many times I write it out, or how many times I say it, it's not working, it's not happening. And that's just not the full picture. So yeah, trying to help people understand it.
That's where, depending on, and again, I don't just blurt out hard truths all the time, but I will, depending on where I'm at with someone, they will say something and I will ask a couple things. Is it true in your truth center? Like, for instance, you could say affirmations all day, every day until the cows come home. And it's similar to what you were saying about nervous system. If your truth center, which I teach a lot about chakra energies, your truth center, which is primarily for a lot of people, gut or heart or sacral, if that part of if those energies in your body don't feel that that's true or that you deserve it to your point, it's not coming because your body's like, that's false.
Totally.
That's
Makes
not
a
true.
difference.
Like,
Yeah,
so I don't necessarily, and again, everything is nuanced. I don't necessarily agree with like speak it into existence. Kind of yes and but. If your energy centers aren't aligned to that, then no. If they are, yeah. Yeah, speak it into existence, absolutely. So many people always want to quote unquote pick my brain about it because I'm like, oh, of course I have thoughts about that. Because if your truth center is not a hell yes for whatever you're trying to manifest, it's a hell no. And
hmm
and that's where the deeper work must come in to say like what is in you that doesn't deserve or isn't ready for this. And that's where it gets a hard truth, where it's not true that you want this. And the ego would be like, how dare you? Of course
Mhm.
I want this safety and stability. Okay, yeah, but and there's just so much more than that. It's not just what brain's going to want to keep us safe. Amazing. Not necessarily what's at the soul level of actual desire. It's
Yeah.
like I always give this like basic example. Is it true that you want $1 million or is it true that you want to pay your bills every month? A lot of people are like, oh, because sure, you might want $1 million, but what if your monthly bill is $1 million? Then you only paid 1 month of bills. So really get into what you truly desire.
No, I love that distinction.
So Rachel, oh gosh, as we start to wind down, and you touched on this earlier in the segment, and I think it's really important to come back to. In this age where there's like, we see a lot of new age spirituality or unintentional cultural appropriation or envy toward different practices or closed practices, what would you share with people who don't realize the importance of encroaching on whether it's a closed practice or something that they're envying as to not cultural appropriate?
Mm. Yeah, I've been asked this question before in a different way, but like I think people are curious about that because I do think one, I mean, there's multiple cultures that are heavily appropriated, but I do think like Native American, Indigenous culture is one of those, especially in spiritual communities. I mean, I think we talked about it a little bit. I'm always going to encourage people to get curious about their own lineage, right? But if you're really drawn to a certain practice, a ritual, a routine, something that you have seen, maybe, it was in a ceremony or maybe it was in a yoga class or maybe like whatever. My invitation would be, why do you feel so called to adopt this as your own? And if it's a personal practice and there is something that you feel like deep within your system, like feels really strong, you feel very connected. Okay, if it's a personal practice, sure. And you're doing so in a respectful way. But I think it's problematic when it then becomes part of, someone's personal brand and they are marketing it and using it in spiritual marketing language and it's very clearly ripped off from another culture. And it may not be indigenous culture to like North America, it could be absolutely anywhere. And I just think, pause, what is it that is compelling you to take this and make it your own? I really just think that moment of awareness, and I think that's maybe what isn't happening so much is like that awareness piece of like just not questioning it. You're just seeing someone else do it. It's synonymous now with spirituality. And so we're playing the part, we're playing the part. And so even that, it's like, so what part of you feels like you need to play a part in order to be spiritual or in order to be intuitive? Like, why does it need to look a certain way? Because I actually think the most authentic way for you to convey your gifts and your spirituality is what is true to you, to your lineage, to your authenticity. Because it's, I'm an Indigenous woman, but I'm not a medicine woman. I'm not touting myself to be a medicine woman. I don't do things in a super traditional way because I'm reconnecting. And I'm also very transparent about the fact that number one, I'm white passing. Number two, I wasn't raised in culture and community, so I'm finding my way again. And I was raised Western for the most part. So I'm merging the two worlds. I'm walking in two worlds, and that's what works for me. My spirituality isn't something I need to promote or market in a certain way. It's just who I am. And I think that is allowed. Everyone's allowed to express spirituality in a way that is just real and authentic to themselves. And I think, yeah, that's my invitation and what I encourage.
I'm going to bring up an example that I see almost every day.
Mhm.
Y'all understand what smudging is and the origin of it. And I will leave it there.
Period. Mic drop.
Rachel, where can we find you and support your work?
Well, we've connected through LinkedIn, so more than happy to connect via LinkedIn. First and last name, Rachael Hunt. I am also on Instagram at Freedom Rach with two H's, or at the Cyclebreakers Podcast, where I share new episodes every Thursday. And yeah, you can find that podcast on every major listening or watching site, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And yeah, that's probably where I hang out the most. So I invite you to, yeah, come find me and chat with me there.
Does Freedom School have a website?
Oh, it does. Freedomschool.co. So yeah, you can also check me out on the website as well.
Closing remarks as we wrap up.
Just thank you for this conversation. Honestly, I love any time I can connect with someone who understands spirituality and the realm in the same way. It's from a real authentic place. Like I really love those conversations and I can tell that you're yeah, like you're very embodied in this work in these conversations. So I appreciate that and just grateful for your thoughtfulness and your questions today.
Thanks, Rachael.